around us are various vendors that have various solutions for what I would call common vanilla cyber criminals who are just after money. But the question is, what about state actors? How do you fight state actors? Is there a different mindset for state actors? Russia, Iran, China, and a host of others. What's the mindset? How do we put our minds around these attacks? I think looking through my notes from the International Cybersecurity Forum in Lille, France from last week, I think one of my biggest takeaways, especially when it comes to state actors, is this drive to rethink mindsets, rethink approaches to how we're going to defeat state actors. I think one of the people that has been at the forefront of trying to help us, in effect, wrap our brains around taking a new approach is John Frank of Microsoft. He's probably done the most in trying to help us look at this in a more holistic fashion. John and I attend both the Lille conference together, and also next month we'll be at the Munich Security Conference. John gave the keynote address this year at the FIC conference, and he talked about these very issues. And in this next clip, he summarizes for us the main points from that keynote, as well as talking about the Paris call, which you just mentioned, and the Munich Security Conference. John, as expected, another jam-packed keynote. You're very good at these. For the audience, can you just kind of give me, say, your 2 or 3 takeaway points?
I think the first point is that the cybersecurity situation is as grave as ever. The risk of an escalating attack that has profound challenges for civil society has never been greater. The second point, on a more positive note, we have seen an important initiative led by the French government, the Paris call. And the third point is we need broad multi-stakeholder engagement to make those principles in the Paris call real, and so they can bring some more security and stability.
And we had talked off camera that we're actually talking about a requirement of a different mindset. And can you just tell me a little bit more about that, or your views?
Absolutely. We need to figure out new ways to work together. We can't try to stay in our separate worlds of diplomacy versus industrial innovation and customers. We do need multi-stakeholder action, and the Paris call does provide a framework so that on each of the 9 principles, we need to find small steps we can work on, but collectively, that is the way forward.
And one last question, because we both attend the Munich Security Conference. Do you find that to be beneficial? Do you think they're kind of getting it, or diplomatically? Tell me what you think.
Well, I think Wolfgang Ischinger has done a great job of bringing cyber to a community that hadn't necessarily thought about it. The key is, though, we need to kind of bring it to the main stage, and we need to find ways, because technology is such an important part of defense and security, and sometimes the policymakers are a little less familiar with technology than maybe we'd like them to be.
But you think they're getting kind of more interested?
Oh, I don't think you can be in public life today and not appreciate the incredible importance of information technology and the risks of cybersecurity.
Another key figure in this approach, new approach of trying to take a collective action, trying to take a holistic view, is Michael Daniel. Michael is the president and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance, which is based in the Washington, D.C. area. And again, this following clip will be a very short portion of a much, much longer interview that we have with him. And what's interesting is he talks about the fact that when you look at cyber security threats, we're looking at, in effect, different math, different physics, and different silos that need to be brought together. And what's interesting in this clip that I chose is the fact that Michael talks about the fact that we actually have a number of tools that we're using now that can be applied to this whole issue. And for those of my audience who are in the e-discovery legal technology space, he actually talks about the various tools that we use for corporations to control their litigation risk. You had mentioned the fact that we kind of have to change our thinking here. And I was wondering if you could just summarize that.
Well, I think some of our key problems are that we still treat cybersecurity as if it were purely a technical problem, and it's not. It is also an economics problem, it's a human psychology problem, it's a national security problem, as well as being a technical problem. And two, our general way of thinking about the world, the physics and math of cyberspace are different than the physics and math of the real world. And so our mental models for how we try to deal with things in cyberspace don't often work. And so we need a different approach to deal with those two key factors.
I know you have another engagement, so just very quickly, one more question. You talked about changing the mindset. Can you go into that again?
Sure. I would say that just as we've had a problem with treating cybersecurity as if it were a purely technical problem, then one of the things you clearly need to do is change how you think about it. So stop thinking about it as a purely technical problem that you want to remand to the geek in the closet and hopefully never talk to again, but instead think about it as applying all of the different tools that we would use and integrate them into building our cyber defenses. So take into account how people actually have to interact with the technology. So don't tell people to create passwords that are random, that are different for everything that they do. Tell them use a password manager, right? Similarly, we also need to stop thinking about it in terms of a solution to the problem, because we'll never solve it. But instead, if we think of it as a risk management problem that you can reduce the risk of, and companies apply all of the same tools that they use to manage their risk of brand damage or legal litigation, they can use those same tools to drive down their cyber risk. And then we also need to start thinking about the problem more strategically and think about how we disrupt what the adversaries are doing. Our adversaries all have a goal. They're trying to steal money, they're trying to steal information that they can turn into money, they're trying to cause some sort of physical effect in the real world, but the number of goals is actually pretty limited. And so if we start thinking about what are the things that we can do to stop them from achieving their goals, and if we stop them anywhere short of those goals, we've succeeded. Even if they've quote unquote gotten into the network, if we stop them from achieving their goals, we still succeed. And those changes in mindset will make us much more able to tackle this cybersecurity problem and drive the risk down and drive it to a level that we can manage as societies for the long term.
This year's Munich Security Conference will be especially interesting for the fact that there's going to be several sessions, several panels that deal directly with cyber attacks and state actors. And what's more interesting about this event is that you get to rub shoulders with heads of state, members of parliament, the military, members of the intelligence community, so it's really a great group of people that are actually the decision makers in cyber threats. And this video you're watching is actually the precursor to a much longer video that we're producing on state actors and cyber threats. So in addition to longer pieces from John Frank and Mike Daniel, we're also going to have some interviews with the author Alexander Klimberg, who's probably written the definitive text called The Darkening Web, which discusses all the details with respect to state actors and cyber war, as well as Colonel Cyril Piat, who is head at the Ministry of the Interior in France with respect to criminal investigations when it comes to state actors. And we're going to include David Grout, who is the head of business development and technology for EMEA at FireEye, and a few other surprises. So stay tuned, there's a lot more to come.